Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. I am love, I am love, pure love. I am love, I am love, pure love. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. I am peace, I am peace, divine peace. I am peace, I am peace, divine peace. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. I am joy, I am joy, endless joy. I am joy, I am joy, endless joy. Ananda Swarupa, Prema Swarupa, Ananda Swarupa, Ananda Swarupa, Prema Swarupa, Ananda Swarupam. Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. I am Om, I am Om, eternal Om. I am Om, I am Om, eternal Om. Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om.
Tadekam smaramasthadekam bhajamaha, tadekam jagat sakshirupam namamaha, sadekam nidhanam niralambamisham Bhavambodhipodam Sharanyam Rajamaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. On that alone do we meditate, that alone do we worship, to that alone, the witness of the universe, do we bow, to that one who is our sole eternal support, the self-existent Lord, the raft to safety across the ocean of this world, do we come for refuge. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good morning. Great to see all of you, and special thanks to our special guest, Swami Nirvanananda Saraswati. We were privileged to have him with us last night, singing so many divine songs with all of us, and he agreed to share one more this morning. And really, this message is all we need. Today's topic is addressing anger. If we can remember who we are, if the Lord can remind us who we are at all times, that remembrance, we will have no trouble with anger. That's actually the problem, and we'll get more into that. But in a way, we don't really even have to do the talk. We just have to remember the song. That's all. So since we still have about 50 minutes, I will talk a little bit. And the topic naturally follows from last month's topic, which was taming the fire within. That was the fire of desire, the fire of craving, which is burning within us. And we find that the same fire, which is that fire of craving, also manifests as anger and burns us. It's that fire of craving for permanence, but looking for it in the impermanent, of that profound feeling of unfulfillment because we can't get satisfaction in the temporal. And thinking about this topic, it really struck me that we seem to be living now in an age of anger, when we find everywhere people are angry. Everywhere we have expressions of anger, and it's quite okay. It's considered quite okay and even good to express it, especially in social media, in politics, on the roadways. There's so many things to be angry about, and people get so angry about so many things, like leaf blowers in the morning, or dog owners who don't pick up after their dogs. People get really steamed up about that. Police who don't arrest the criminals as if it's the police's fault. Drug addicts who live on the street. People of the other political party, whichever that may be, who just don't get it. They just don't get it. Both sides feel the same way. Or, in a personal way, my boss's insult, my lover's betrayal, my own body's betrayal as I get an illness. And we find vast swaths of people forming a kind of wave of anger, which brings electing certain people to power in different countries, or voting to Brexit, or these kind of things. Yes, it's all a part of this age of anger, when it's okay and even good to express our anger. And perhaps this is to be expected, because it's a natural outcome of what our society places as the real aim of life. The real aim of life? To enjoy pleasure and wealth and happiness. And yet, we find that same society is putting all kinds of obstacles in that project of enjoying and amassing wealth. And so it naturally, for most people, it's unattainable. So naturally, a deep sense of frustration sets in, a frustration which ripens into anger. So, from the Vedantic standpoint, we call anger one of the 6 passions, and we consider it a great obstacle in spiritual life. There are 6 of them, of course. Desire or craving. This craving is really the root of all of the others. Craving which leads to anger. Greed is a specific form of craving. Envy is another kind of craving for something that someone else has that we don't have. And pride is a kind of craving for my own greatness. And then delusion, which is the result of all these others. They cover the mind and we don't see clearly. In our saner moments, I think we understand that most of the things we get angry about are not really worth it. It's not worth wasting so much energy about our neighbors not picking up after their dogs and all those kind of things. It's not worth it. And we recognize that anger makes us feel terrible. We feel bad. After we have an outburst of anger, we feel bad. Perhaps we've insulted someone, we've hurt someone else's feeling. It's even bad for our physical health. It's bad for our mental health. It robs us of peace of mind, and it even robs us of sleep oftentimes. Yet, it's so hard to let go of it. And we're always ready to blame someone else for being angry and fault someone else for becoming angry, but still there are certain things about which maybe we feel like we have a good reason to be angry. We have the right to be angry. We have the right. Sometimes it really seems like we have the right to be angry. Though nobody likes an angry person, at least if the anger is directed towards me, still sometimes we like to be angry. Thinking about this, I remembered a television program that I used to watch as a child. And those of you who are around my age or within a few years probably remember it. It was called The Incredible Hulk. And now apparently there have been some movies that have come out. It's sort of gotten even more strange. But The Incredible Hulk was, this was the premise. For those of you who don't know it, there was a doctor named David Banner. And he was doing some medical experiments on himself, which had gone awry, and he exposed himself to radiation. And therefore, he unleashed this incredible power within him of anger. And so when he would become angry, he would transform into this Hulk, this giant creature, as he called it, which was all green. It was played by the actor Lou Ferrigno, who was a bodybuilder, Mr. Universe. Huge muscles and completely green in color and very violent. So what would happen in each episode would involve David Banner moving to another city, trying to escape his past, and at the same time searching for a cure, and naturally getting into situations in which, though he didn't want to get angry, finally he was forced to get angry because he would be beaten or tortured or there'd be some kind of physical attack, and he would get angry, and then his eyes would light up bright green, and he would grow, and you'd see the shirt breaking up because he'd be growing, so his clothes would break off of him, and then he'd throw those very bad people who were doing very bad things. He would grab them and throw them through walls and things like that, and we'd feel like, good, he got angry and he solved the problem. So afterwards, he wouldn't remember anything of what happened. He would only come back and he'd find that all his clothes in tatters, and he'd know that the creature had been unleashed again, and something bad. He had done some violence, some mayhem. Now, they got some things right about this. Anger is like that in many ways. It comes up and it takes over our whole mind, and we do things we don't even know what we're doing. And it creates mayhem. We do all kinds of violent things, all kinds of wrong things. So in that sense, they got it right. And he was always desperately seeking a cure, but it was always out just beyond his reach. Just like we, at least some of us, are trying to master our anger, and yet still sometimes we get angry. I remember this one line from the movie, he'd say, "Don't make me angry, Mr. Jones. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry." And he's starting to get angry. "You wouldn't like me when I'm angry." But they don't understand that really they won't like him because he becomes the Hulk and all that. But some things they got wrong, because the creature always did the right thing. The creature always beat up the bad guys and protected the innocent victim. and the wicked gets punished, and we get satisfied. But anger is not like that it always does the right thing. In fact, that's the very nature of anger, that it clouds our understanding. And so we end up most often making things worse, making confusion worse confounded, as the saying goes. So this kind of television program, and there are many others like it, which promote the idea that anger is actually a force for good. All those westerns, the shoot-'em-up westerns, where the hero is someone who's angry for decades maybe, and finally catches the man who killed his brother 20 years later and kills him, and then... So we resonate with this fantasy. It's deeply embedded in our culture. And the producers of this show also had the idea that every one of us has such a creature within us. A hulk, a creature that is awakened when we become angry. And it sounds kind of like that could be the case. It appeals to me to a certain extent, but actually, Vedanta will say no. That creature is a mere figment of our imagination. And if we look at yoga psychology, we can understand that anger is nothing but a wave in the mind. A wave with which we identify ourselves, true, but it's nothing but a wave in the mind, a vritti. Now, by examining this wave, by looking at where does this wave come from, where does it arise from, and by developing methods of counteracting it, we can actually make significant progress towards overcoming anger. The first thing, however, that is required in this project is to convince ourselves that actually we want to do it. That we actually, to overcome anger, to not be an angry person, is a good thing. Is it really needed? There's a long discussion, fascinating discussion in the Mahabharata, that ancient epic, which involves the Pandavas, the good guys, the 5 Pandava brothers and their close family members, and the bad guys, the Kauravas, the wicked brothers. And they have this feud, and the Pandavas are exiled to the forest for 13 years, and they've been so much disrespected and dishonored, and attempts are made on their lives, all kinds of wicked things are done, and Draupadi has been, they attempted to disrobe her in public, all kinds of terrible things. So naturally, one would expect them to be angry. And some of them were angry. But Yudhishthira, the king, the eldermost brother, he was unflappable, he was not angry at all. And Draupadi, the Pandava's wife, she launches into a long tirade, almost a tirade. She is trying to say that, hey, sometimes anger is good. In this case, all the things we have been mistreated so much. We have been, we are kings, and look at us dressed in bark and eating roots in the forest. This is something about which we should be angry. You should be angry, and then you should go and kill the Kauravas and take back our rightful place in the kingdom. And she makes some good arguments, but he replies eloquently and forcefully, delineating all the defects of anger. It's kind of like a homily on the defects of anger. I'll just read a short passage of it. It's a long Sanskrit passage. I'll just read a little bit of the English translation. He says, "Anger is in this world the root of the destruction of mankind. How can one like me indulge in anger which brings about the destruction of the world?" Goes on. "The angry man commits a sin. The angry man murders his preceptor." What could be worse than murdering your guru? The angry man murders his guru. "The angry man insults his elders with harsh words. The angry man cannot distinguish what should be and should not be said. There is nothing which cannot be said or done by an angry man. From anger, a man may kill one who should not be killed and adore one that should be killed. An angry man may even dispatch his own self to the abode of Yama. It's a poetic way of saying committing suicide. Yama is the god of death. To dispatch yourself to the abode of Yama. Suicide, people commit suicide in anger, to hurt other people. Beholding these evils, anger is conquered by one desirous of excellent well-being, both in this world and in the next. So do we agree? Is anger really to be given up? Aren't there some things about which we should be angry? What about, say, separating infants from their parents at the border? Shouldn't we be angry about that? Or cruel exploitation of children by criminals? Or the meter maid who wouldn't listen to our very good excuse that we had? Righteous indignation. There's this idea of righteous indignation, that we're angry but for a righteous reason, the righteous cause. Isn't this what brings about change in the world? So it does seem that anger gives us tremendous energy. Yudhishthira actually points out it is ignorant people, it is unwise people who regard anger as energy, as vitality. To think of anger as vitality is a mistake. It actually destroys us. It robs us of our vitality. Swami Vivekananda points out, in Practical Vedanta, he points out, if you read the lives of the great workers which the world has produced, you will find that they were wonderfully calm men. The great workers, men and women, we should say. Nothing, as it were, could throw them off their balance, he says. That is why the person who becomes angry never does a great amount of work. And the person whom nothing can make angry accomplishes so much. The person who gives way to anger or hatred or any other passion cannot work. He or she only breaks himself to pieces and does nothing practical. It is the calm, forgiving, equable, well-balanced mind that does the greatest amount of work. So I'm trying to impress on all of our minds that anger is never helpful. Concern is helpful. We can recognize injustice and be concerned about it and act against it. Do something about separating children from their parents at the border. Yes, we are called to do something about it, but not in anger. Out of the calm, clear-seeing mind, we can act much more effectively. So when we can recognize that anger is a sign not of strength but of weakness, then we can actually muster the will to overcome it. So what is anger then? What is anger? Really, it's a reaction in the mind, a reaction to a stimulus, a kind of stimulus response, and it's accompanied by physical symptoms. It may be even instinctual. Of course, Vivekananda reminds us instinct is nothing but habits, habits driven so deep that they become automatic. It certainly has its biological component, so we may feel it is perfectly natural. But Vedanta calls upon us, of course, to transcend our biology. And Vedanta insists we are not bodies, we are not even our minds, we are the eternal spirit, pure consciousness, ever free and blissful. So the body, yes, there may be a biological component to anger. When we feel the body feels threatened, anger does arise. But as an instinct, it can be changed, since an instinct is merely an involved habit. Vivekananda points out beautifully in Raja Yoga how anger completely takes over our mind. When I'm angry, he says, when I am angry, my whole mind becomes a huge wave of anger. And he describes how it happens. He gives an example. A man says something very harsh to me. What happens? I begin to feel that I am getting heated. We can feel. Huh? Then, what happens? He goes on until I am perfectly angry and forget myself, identify myself with anger. He points out, when he first began to abuse me, I thought, I am going to be angry. Anger was one thing, and I was another. But when I became angry, I was anger. We completely identify with these waves in our minds, and we become anger. Actually, it is not so. It is simply a wave in the mind. Can we distance ourselves a little from the wave? Can we watch it coming on? Say, oh, here comes a wave of anger. If we can stop it before it becomes a giant wave and completely takes over our mind, then we have a chance. Once it completely takes over the mind, it's really very difficult to do anything. At that time, better go run around the block or something. If we still have a little bit of clarity of mind, go run around the block, chant the name of the Lord, do something. But the key is to catch it before it completely takes over our minds. And then Vivekananda points out that first we have to deal with the gross expressions of anger. Then we start to deal with the anger on a more subtle level. He says these feelings have to be controlled in the germ, the root, in their fine forms, before we have even become conscious that they are acting on us. And we'll come just a little bit later, I'll come back to this, how we do that. But why does this wave of anger arise in the first place? What is the real root of anger? And we already talked about that, and we talked about it last month also. Sri Krishna in the Gita teaches, and it's not quite intuitive, but if we think about it, I think we'll agree that anger is basically the outcome of frustrated desire. And there's a beautiful pair of verses in the Gita which points this out. And secondly, anger arises in a mind or temperament which is rajasic, which is very restless and active rather than peaceful. Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, Dhyayato vishayam pumsa sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha kamat krodho vijayate krodhat bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibhramaha smriti bramshat buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashyati. Pranashyati perishes. The person perishes. One thing leads to another. Thinking of objects, thinking of what we think of. When we think of something, attachment naturally grows in the mind towards that thing. Dhyato vishayam pumsa sangaha. Attachment arises for that which we think about. And from attachment comes a craving to possess, to protect, to have. And when that craving is obstructed, anger arises. It's that simple. And then he goes on to explain what happens when anger arises. A delusion takes over our mind, sammoha. From that delusion, we forget. We forget that we shouldn't say nasty things to our spouse. We forget that we shouldn't insult our boss. We forget that we shouldn't throw Molotov cocktails in the street. We forget all these things. And smriti brahmshat buddhinasho, that faculty of deciding what's right and wrong, that gets completely obliterated, and therefore we perish. We ruin our lives. One thing leads to another. And it all begins with a thought. It all begins with a thought. What we think of, attachment grows, desire grows, what we think of. So what do we think of most? Me. I think of me, mostly. This body, and I think this body is me, and this personality, and my likes and dislikes. I like this, I don't like that. I am a good person. I follow Vedanta. I have so many good qualities. That's what we spend a lot of times thinking about, our own constructed self. We call this the false self. not the true self. Our own constructed self, which is a mixture of body and personality and tendencies in our mind, and we sort of hold that to be who we are. And then, when that is in any way threatened, anger arises. So that's why when we say that, oh, someone insulted me, I get angry, what desire is there? The desire, it's that craving to maintain this illusory self. It's a project doomed to failure, and yet we're trying to maintain this image of who we are. And when it gets threatened, then we respond with anger. It's more simply understood if I say we want that raise at work, and we go and we ask the boss, and the boss says, no, forget it. We get angry. Okay, that's a simple cause and effect. We had a desire for a raise. The boss says no, we get angry. Our desire is obstructed. But in many cases, it's more subtle. And oftentimes, we're not really angry for the reason we think we're angry. So it bears looking deeply. What really is the deeper root of our anger? So it's also wonderful to understand if what we think of, we become attached to, then the simple remedy, the very simple remedy here is change what we think about. Think of God. Repeat the name of God. If we change what we think about, we'll start to become, if we start thinking of God, we'll start to develop attachment for God and longing for God. And if that longing is obstructed, that will just spur us on all the more to attain God. This is one of the secrets of, I feel, of this problem of anger. Bring God into the picture, or our true self. Think of ourselves, change our self-image. We need to completely change our self-image from a limited person who is in the world and has this personality and this very precious body to a shining light, a spirit of the very nature of peace and bliss and love. And we take the help of God to remind us. That was what our opening song was all about. Remind me who I am. If I remember that I am joy, I am peace, then what does it matter if someone criticizes? They're not criticizing the true me. They're criticizing the false me, which I'm at least beginning to know is not really me. Arjuna asks a relevant question. He asks Sri Krishna in the 3rd chapter. He says, Atakena prayuktoyam papam charati pushaha anichannapi varshneya baladiva niyojitaha. Why is it, Krishna, that people do wicked things that they don't really want to do them, and yet they do them? They do wicked things. Why? Why do they do, without wanting to, driven as it were by some kind of force? Why do they do these things? What compels them to do it? And Sri Krishna's reply, Kama esha krodha esha rajo guna samudbhavaha mahashano mahapapma vidhyena miha vairinam. It is kama, that craving that we're talking about, and krodha, anger. It is kama and krodha. And where do they come from? Rajoguna samudbhavaha. They arise from the guna of rajas. It is all-devouring. This craving, this anger is all-devouring and of great wickedness. Mahapapma, of great wickedness. Know that this is your enemy here, Arjuna. This is your true enemy. This is our true enemy in spiritual life. And even for living a happy life in the world, if we're tormented by anger, there's no peace. There is no happiness. So he goes on to describe this kama as an unappeasable fire and an unseizable foe. But this is what I find helpful about this instruction is he points out that it arises out of this guna of rajas. Now, I don't think we have time to go into a lengthy discussion of what are the gunas. Vedanta students are familiar with this. The idea that we find three main strands, three main tendencies, as it were, which make up our minds and our personalities, and everything we see in this world can be characterized as more or less falling into one of these three departments. Sattva, peace, light, harmony, om, everything is fine. Rajas, restlessness, anger, desire, craving. Red, tamas, darkness, indolence, laziness, death, sleep, negativity. These three. And we can recognize all three of them in our own minds. And to a certain extent, we need all three. If there was no rajas, why would we get up in the morning? To get out of tamas. But each guna can overpower the others as it becomes stronger. As if tamas becomes very strong in a person, that person we'll find is extremely lazy, won't do anything, always negative, always complaining. Someone who is very rajasic, always active. Rajas comes in and yes, we get up and we're doing, going. Type A personality. Angry also. Sattva, peaceful, calm. Someone insults me, I don't insult them back. I'm not so much interested in projecting my own greatness before others. Sri Ramakrishna tells some funny stories, no, about the sattvic devotee, the one who is one who meditates under the mosquito curtain, because in India we always use mosquito curtains, too many mosquitoes. Under the mosquito curtain at night meditates, so nobody even knows that she is meditating. And in the morning she sleeps a little late, and people think, oh, she didn't sleep well, so she's sleeping late. Actually, she was up half the night meditating. That's the sattvic devotee. Whereas the rajasic devotee goes to the worship hall wearing a silk robe and wears around his neck a chain of beads, of prayer beads, and interspersed with the beads, which are made of seeds, perhaps there are a few gold beads interspersed as well, and puts a big mark on the forehead to show everybody how holy he is. So this is the kind of differentiation we have. So we are called, if we want to make progress in spiritual life, I think we recognize that the sattvic mind is the healthy mind, which will help us in our spiritual life. So we develop that. One of the real signs of rajas, and we see it everywhere today in society, not only this anger, but simply this sense of hurry. And I've often felt lately that there's just too much to do and not enough time in which to do it. And this seems to be a kind of almost a universal phenomenon. Everybody is feeling this way. And yet, turns out that everybody was feeling this way 100 years ago also. It's the nature of rajas to feel that way. There's too much to do and not enough time to do it, so we have to hurry. And so we're hurrying while being late to our next appointment, and then there's a traffic jam and we get angry. Slow down. Swami Vivekananda calls it this indecent and brutal hurry. He was never one to hurry. There's a wonderful incident that they were going to catch a ferry to across the bay before the Golden Gate Bridge in Northern California, and they had to catch a train. And they were running a little late for the train, and they missed it. When they entered the station, it had just left. The train would take them to the ferry. Well, there was another train a couple of blocks away, so Vivekananda, along with Mrs. Alice Hansbrough, went to the other train station. And as they're walking in the station, the train is starting to pull out. And the brakeman, or whoever it is, who's standing on the caboose, the last car of the train, he calls out to them, "If you run, I'll hold the train." what would we do? We would run, right? I think almost all of us would run. Alice Hansbrough looked at Swami Vivekananda and he said, "I will not run." So they turned around and went back, and they went the next week. One of the qualities of a peaceful mind, free from anger, and one of the most important qualities for us to counteract anger is patience. Patience. And how can we develop patience? Slow down. Slow down. We talked about catching that wave of anger before it fully takes over the mind. How can we catch it if the mind is running so fast? So slow down. Take a breath. Enjoy that stop at the traffic light. It gives us a chance to take a breath, look around, chant the name of the Lord a few times. Vivekananda goes on in Raja Yoga, the science of yoga psychology, to discuss how do we start to control these fine tendencies, the subtle tendencies of anger. He says we have to begin with the big waves and come down and down. When a big wave of anger has come into the mind, how are we to control that? Just by raising a big opposing wave. This is an important concept in yoga called pratipaksha bhavanam. It's the raising of an opposing wave. And he gives the example. Think of love, he says. Sometimes a mother is very angry with her husband. It happens. And while in that state, the baby comes in. And she picks up the baby, she kisses the baby. The old wave of anger dies out, and a new wave arises, love for the child. That suppresses the other one. Love is opposite to anger. So we find that by raising the opposite waves, we can conquer those which we want to reject. It's a wonderful teaching. First, of course, we have to recognize the wave of anger. We have to remember, oh yes, anger, I've decided I don't want to be angry. Let me raise an opposite wave. Now, if we happen to have the baby handy, it really makes it easier, because holding a baby, it's naturally easy to love it. But we are all practicing devotion to God. We can remember our beloved Lord, or we can remember someone whom we love. If we're angry with our husband right now, we can remember our son. If we're angry with our aunt right now, we can remember our uncle. But it's so wonderful to remember that source of all love, the divine, our divine mother, who is all loving, who is love itself. And then he goes on to say, if we can raise in our fine nature, in our subtle nature, those subtle opposing waves, they will check the subtle workings of anger beneath the conscious surface. So he describes how instinctive actions, those reactions of anger or whatever that seem to be instinctive, they started out as conscious actions, but they have gone down deep into the unconscious and simply become instinct, as it were. They become very subtle. So likewise, we raise consistently and continually raising good waves in the mind and let them settle down deep into the subconscious. And so this way, this is what spiritual practice is all about. As our dear Swami Nirvanananda says, slowly and slowly we transform the mind. It's not something that it's going to happen overnight, but slowly and slowly we continue to raise the good thoughts and continue to let the angry thoughts, the wicked thoughts, the unhelpful thoughts, we let them go, let them go, let them go. And cultivate patience, cultivate compassion. See that when someone is expressing anger towards me, that person is actually ignorant, is actually suffering. When we are angry, we suffer. Can we have compassion for such a person? Compassion cancels out anger. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do, said Jesus on the cross. when we were kids, we went once to the Science Museum. It was in San Francisco. I forget what it was called. Emporium or something. And they had all kinds of hands-on experiments. It was quite fascinating, audio-visual things. And there was one thing which was called it was a little electrode that you put your fingers on, and it measures skin conductance. And it's called the electrodermal or galvanic skin response. And so the instructions were you put your fingers on this little sensor, and then it was suggested that you could think about something which you really love, or something which really makes you angry, or something like that, and see the effect. And apparently, when we get angry, the pores begin to release sweat. No, we get sweaty palms. We get angry. A lot of physiological changes also. And there was someone in our group who put the fingers on this galvanic skin response machine and followed the instructions. And suddenly, and it gave a tone. It was the more sweaty your palms, the higher the tone. So that thing started going. And so we all were, oh my God, what is this person thinking about? That person wouldn't tell us what was on the mind, but we gathered that it was probably some kind of long-standing resentment, an injury that happened long time ago, a terrible blow in life, and still holding on all these years later. This is called harboring resentment. We can say harboring resentment. And these kind of resentments, they come out in anger towards others. Again, we may become angry and not realize that the real reason this anger is arising is because we're harboring this resentment from so long ago. How do we let go of these long buried resentments? And of course the answer is, we know what the answer is, only it's one of the most difficult practices: forgiveness. Forgiveness. I think the clue to forgiveness, the real clue to forgiveness, is changing our self-image. Not thinking of myself as a body with a personality that was insulted or whose heart was broken, but thinking of myself as the child of the divine, thinking of myself as spirit, as pure consciousness. And yes, that body-mind who thinks of himself as Mahayogananda was insulted, but that's not really who I am. I am pure spirit. I cannot be touched by any insult. I cannot be touched by any fire, by any knife, nothing can touch me. Now, what about, sometimes we see people who we think of as being very spiritual, and they get angry. What about that? That's a legitimate objection, isn't it? What about Swami Vivekananda? He showed a lot of anger, didn't he? There's a fascinating story. He was on board ship in the Mediterranean in January of 1897, going back to India for the first time after working so hard in the West. And it's recorded in the Life. There were two missionaries, Christian missionaries, on board. They were between Aden and Colombo, somewhere in the ocean, I guess. Colombo means Sri Lanka. And these missionaries insisted on discussing the contrast between Hinduism and Christianity. And of course, their view was that Christianity was the only true religion, and Hinduism was extremely defective. And apparently, they were very offensive in their way of arguing. But they were arguing with Swami Vivekananda, so you can't beat Swami Vivekananda in argument. He had such a command over not only the tradition of Vedanta and Hinduism, but also Christianity. He would be able to teach them Christianity better than they knew it themselves. So basically, he destroyed all their arguments. And finally, they lost their temper and became very abusive, using abusive language, abusing Hindus and their religion. And then the life records that the Swami stood it as long as he could. Then, walking close to one of the speakers, he suddenly seized him quietly but firmly by the collar and said, half humorously, half grimly, "If you abuse my religion again, I'll throw you overboard." Apparently, the missionary shook in his boots, it says, and said under his breath, "Let me go, sir, I'll never do it again." And then from that time on, he was most obsequious to the Swami, very respectful, and he endeavored to remedy his misbehavior by exceeding kindness, says the biography. So I hope that it was not simply out of fear, but out of realizing his own mistake, that he changed his ways. But so what about this? Sri Ramakrishna used to say, and one of those nice Bengali sayings that rhymes, "Sadhur rag, jolir dag." Rag means anger. Sadhur rag, the anger of a good person, the anger of a noble person, is like jolir dag, a mark, a dag on water. Like a mark on water. Can it leave any permanent impression? Say you take a stick and draw a mark on the water. How long can you see it? A split second and it's gone. So Vivekananda's anger, when he is, yes, he's showing a little anger. And we don't really have time to go into the story of the snake, but you know the snake who forgot to hiss, no? There was a snake, the story in short is that there was a snake who was taught not to bite and injure people. And so what ended up happening is that the boys beat it up and almost killed it. And when his teacher, his guru, came back and asked him, "Well, what happened to you?" Finally it remembered, "Oh yes, the boys beat me." And he said, "You fool, I told you not to bite. I didn't tell you not to hiss." So sometimes in life, perhaps a little hissing is necessary. But let it not, Sri Ramakrishna says, never inject your venom. So can we do it like that, like a mark on water? A remarkable incident in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. You know, he had a wealthy man at his beck and call, Mathur Babu, who was the proprietor of the Kali temple, and he considered that the Divine Mother had provided him to look after his needs, and he would do anything for him. And no amount of money was too great to spend for whatever he needed. Not that he needed anything, but Mathur Babu was always ready to provide anything. And Mathur Babu had a priest who worked at his home, who would come to his home to do the daily rituals in the temple shrine. And he became very jealous of Sri Ramakrishna, and he believed that Ramakrishna had some kind of incantation, some kind of spell by which he had controlled Mathur Babu. And he himself was trying to control him. If you can control a wealthy man, then you can really get a lot of power and wealth and all that. So he was trying to get Sri Ramakrishna to tell him what the secret is. How did you do it? And what could he say? So once, because there was no such charm or anything, it was just that he was, Mathur saw the divine in Sri Ramakrishna. That is why. Once he found him, he happened to come into a room where Sri Ramakrishna was lying in ecstasy. He had been thinking of God. He was lying in ecstasy, unconscious. He was not able to speak. And this priest Haldar came in and started pushing him about and saying, "Tell me, how have you made him subservient to you? How is it that you are silent and feign ignorance? How did you captivate him? Why don't you speak?" And after some time, Sri Ramakrishna wouldn't say anything. He kicked him. With wearing boots, he kicked him with great force several times and insulted him. And Sri Ramakrishna says, in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna it's recorded, "One day I was lying on the ground in an ecstatic mood. The room was dark. Chandra Haldar thought I was feigning that state in order to win Mathur's favor. He entered the room and kicked me several times with his boots. It left black marks on my body. Everybody wanted to tell Mathur Babu about it, but I forbade them. It's fascinating. To take that kind of abuse and not tell anything about it. He knew, of course, that Mathur Babu would have inflicted severe punishment. And so his compassion was so much greater than he was so free of egotism, so free of thinking that this body must be protected from the boots of this Haldar. He thought it was much more important to preserve the life of Haldar. And indeed, Mathur, when he heard about it later, after the man had been dismissed for something else, and Mathur was anguished. He said, had I known it before, the Brahmin would have indeed lost his head. So Mathur was like that, passionate man. And Sri Ramakrishna, we don't sense any glimmer of annoyance or anger. To the end of our hour, the final solution, of course, to rooting out anger and to all of our difficulties is spiritual realization. That is what we are called to do. And that is what we are all working towards in our own ways. But some of the things we have talked about today, which are at least helpful for me, are this idea of retraining the mind. Okay, I get it. It's time. The alarm's going off. So retraining the mind, raising the opposing waves, developing sattva, developing a peaceful mind, slowing down, cultivating patience, cultivating compassion, cultivating forgiveness, and how much energy we can release when we don't waste it in anger. How much energy that we can then direct towards the divine, that we can direct, that we can employ in our spiritual life and in our life of dedication to God and the divine in humanity, to service. Om sarvastaratu durgani sarvo bhadrani pashyatu sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu sarvas sarvatra nandatu. Om asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma mritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May all beings be saved from difficulties. May all beings see the auspicious and the good and realize it. May all beings attain a pure and good mind. May all rejoice everywhere. From the unreal, lead us to the real. From darkness, lead us unto light. From death, lead us to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace.